Hi, everyone. Welcome and thanks for tuning in to Credentialing Impact on Environmental Health. It's Thursday afternoon. You have been watching presentations for the past few days, and I really appreciate that you're taking the time and giving me your attention for this last session. Thank you also for the impact that you have on environmental health. Recent events demonstrate the critical need for environmental health professionals who operate with such integrity, courage, and altruism. So thank you for the work that you do. My name is Sarah Hoover. I'm the Credentialing Manager for the National Environmental Health Association, or NEHA. I hold a Project Management Professional Credential from the Project Management Institute and a Master of Public Health degree from Indiana University. Today, I'm going to highlight the importance of credentials, the creation process to make them, and hopefully instill an understanding and appreciation of the distinguishing characteristics of a credential in you, maybe to the point where you'll be drawn to action. Before we begin, I want to cover some basic housekeeping guidelines. This presentation is pre-recorded. During the presentation, please type questions into the chat as they come to you. At the end of the recorded session, chat questions will be addressed by me. Please keep your microphone muted unless you are speaking. If time allows, we will take live questions after all of the chat questions have been addressed. In today's agenda, we're going to cover 4 main topics. What distinguishes a credential? How is a credential created? How does environmental health benefit from credentials? And how can you support a credentialed workforce? A few years ago, AT&T Wireless came out with an ad campaign entitled, "Just Okay is Not Okay." Maybe you remember these commercials. I have one that we're going to watch, just as an example. But I remember the first time seeing these commercials. I thought it was funny. It was funny because it was true. We rely on the certain level of expertise and experience of our professionals. So let's take a look at this commercial. So I wouldn't go running into my AT&T store looking for that promo. As I mentioned, that video is a few years old, but hopefully it humorously got the point across that we trust certain professionals to operate at a level of competency. We put our hands in their safe practices. I want to cover a few definitions before we go further on in this discussion. I want to talk about what a license is. A license is written into state code or legislative statute, and it specifies that certain jobs have to have a specific license for the person that's practicing that job. An example would be the Arizona Registered Sanitarian, or like the example of our commercial, it's a doctor. A credential is optional. It's made by professional choice or preference, and it's driven by the desire for someone to have professional distinction. It is not regulated by any state requirements. Certification is the process of becoming credentialed. So you can't just say, "I'm credentialed." There's a process that you have to go to that ensures that you are operating at the level expected. And that process is called certification. A certificate denotes mastery of a specific course. You may have tech certificates or other certificates where you go to a class for maybe a few days or a few weeks, and then at the end, you're awarded a certificate that shows you have went through that course and mastered those course objectives. It's helpful to know the differences between a certificate and a credential. While they are both optional, they have distinct differences between the two. The main purpose of a certificate program is to build capacity in recognition of a specialty area of practice or set of skills through new instruction and training. So similar to a tech certificate or office certificate, let's say you do a few modules, and then at the end of those, you're awarded a certificate. That certificate is saying that you sat through that instruction and training, and now you have mastery on what that instruction and training was outlined to do. On the other hand, a credential program is going on education that is already acquired. The purpose of a credential program is to recognize professionals who meet an agreed upon professional standard based on previously acquired knowledge, skills, or competencies. So the difference there is the level of instruction and training. With a certificate program, it's new instruction. With a credential program, it's instruction or knowledge that is assumed to be pre-existing. The goal of a certificate program is that participants acquire specific knowledge, skills, and/or competencies through instruction. The goal of the credential program is that participants validate their competency through a conformity assessment system, aka an exam. The assessment for a certificate is used to evaluate mastery of intended learning outcomes, and it's linked directly to the learning event. So it's somewhat narrow in scope. Whereas the exam or assessment for a credential is used to assure baseline competencies and differentiate professionals. It is not tied to a specific learning event. It's broader in scope and tied to the comprehensive practice of a profession. The life cycle of a certificate program may vary. It may or may not expire, and it does not require continuing education. On the other hand, a credential does have a finite life cycle. It expires periodically, and it requires renewals and continuing education to keep the status in good standing. So to summarize and highlight the attributes of a credential, it's issued by a third party with authoritative power and proves competency in an area of subject matter expertise. It demonstrates a professional is competent, properly trained, and equipped to carry out their duties. It represents a baseline level of education and experience. Active status requires periodic renewal and ongoing continuing education. So by holding a credential, a person is explaining to people, their employers, their peers, and the public, that they operate at a certain level of expected performance. A credential is granted by a third party. There's a lot of work and effort that goes into crafting the credential. It's not as if someone can just go in and state, oh, from now on I hold this credential. They have to demonstrate that they've gone through rigorous instruction, training, and eligibility in order to hold that professional distinction. So how does a credential come to be? Well, it's magic. Just kidding. It's actually a process called DACM. Now you may be wondering, the what? DACM stands for Developing a Curriculum. It was created by The Ohio State University more than 40 years ago and is still used as one of the best practices for creating a credentialing program. The very first step of DACM is a needs analysis. In the needs analysis, you look to see if a professional credential is needed, primarily for the health and safety of the population. If it's determined that a professional credential is in fact needed, then the rest of the steps would be followed. In order to go through these steps, you convene subject matter experts that practice the profession so that they have input into what you're doing. The job occupational analysis, task verification, task selection, and task analysis are all used by input from subject matter experts. through various surveys and workshops. The goal is to identify each task and subtask of a profession and assign weight to it in order to prioritize and categorize all of the different duties and tasks into buckets. Once those buckets are created, you have a blueprint. The blueprint has weights, which then becomes sort of a competency profile. This profile is shared with the instructional designers so that they're able to make materials and resources that support the blueprint. Once you have all of that, the last step is the competency and program assessment, or the exam instrument. Here, individuals take the exam and they either pass or fail by a determined cut score. Passing shows that they have fulfilled all of the needs and requirements and that they have the knowledge to have that professional distinction. You just received a very brief overview of the DACM process. This process takes about 18 months from the needs analysis to the creation of the test form. It's important because it's a proven methodology. It ensures a return on investment for the individuals that put their time and money into seeking a credential. It's validated by statistical and analytical measures. It's based on input from subject matter experts who know the material, and it's strengthened by continuous updating. As I mentioned, these DACM cycles are about 18 months from start to finish, and depending on the profession, they're started every 3 to 5 years. So there's an ongoing process as to where the credential program is at in the whole DACM methodology. So we covered why credentials are important to the professional. When someone holds a professional credential, especially one that's gone through the DACM process, they can ensure that the credential they hold is validated and has been peer-reviewed to be excellent. So how are credentials important for environmental health? Well, back to our AT&T example. Just okay is not okay. More than okay is needed when you're upholding and enforcing things such as safe food practices, safe drinking water, safe air, and basic sanitation that keeps populations alive and thriving. This is achieved in part by recognizing and maintaining credentialed professionals. Here's where you come in. Are you new to environmental health? Are you passionate about making a difference in keeping people alive and safe? Then explore credentials such as the Arizona Registered Sanitarian and NEHA Registered Environmental Health Specialist / Registered Sanitarian. Each of these credentials uses an exam that's gone through the DACM process, so you can be sure that that credential or license is the best in class. Have you been in the field for a while? Are you looking to enhance your expertise and qualifications? Then maybe consider volunteering to be a subject matter expert. You'll get firsthand experience with DACM, and you may have opportunities to earn continuing education. If you're interested in either one of these, I encourage you to reach out to me. My contact information is on the next slide. I can be reached at shoover@neha.org or called at 303-756-9090 extension 328. I've included the volunteer link as well. If you're interested in being a subject matter expert, please use this link. I do look at these volunteer forms, so I encourage anyone who's interested to complete one, and I will be in contact. Thank you for your attention this afternoon. This concludes the recorded session of the presentation, and we'll now move to chat questions.